paradrama tales.
My BIL and his fiancée secretly plotted to humiliate me at my wedding. They smiled, raised glasses, and posed for photos. But behind those polished grins, they were planning to turn my big day into a joke. I found out just in time. And at their wedding, I returned the favor with the truth. Growing up, I always thought family meant fairness, but marrying into James's family quickly shattered that illusion. You see, James is the younger brother, the thoughtful one, the kind one, the one who remembers birthdays and brings flowers just because. And then there's Brad, the older brother, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong even while leaving a trail of disaster behind him. James once told me how Brad would break things and blame him every time. Their mom would laugh and say, "Boys will be boys," and somehow James would end up in trouble. That pattern never stopped. Brad got away with skipping college classes, losing jobs, and treating girlfriends like disposable distractions. Meanwhile, James was working overtime just to be seen. It wasn't just parental favoritism, it was a full-blown family structure built on selective blindness. Brad's arrogance wasn't just tolerated, it was rewarded. At one point, James's mom said, "Brad's just figuring things out like he was still 19 instead of pushing 30. And when he brought home his new girlfriend, Stephanie, the one with the sharp eyes and sharper tongue, his parents didn't blink when she started throwing subtle jabs. In fact, they seemed almost proud. I became the outsider simply for noticing it. Stephanie walked into the family with a mission: charm, divide, and dominate. She'd sit beside James's mom, making comparisons between the brothers that made Brad look like the devoted son, and James like the flake. It wasn't true, but truth didn't matter here. What mattered was perception, and Brad had mastered manipulating it. The longer I stayed silent, the more I saw how deep the favoritism ran. If James brought up something Brad did that crossed the line, he was told to let it go. If I stood up for him, I was being dramatic. So we learned to keep the peace by keeping our distance. But peace isn't the same as respect. And when Brad and Stephanie started planning ways to sabotage our wedding behind closed doors, thinking no one would find out that was the last straw, they underestimated us. They forgot that silence doesn't mean weakness. This wasn't just about wedding drama. It was about a family that protected the wrong son for far too long. And what happens when the quiet ones stop staying quiet? From the moment Stephanie stepped into the family barbecue, she carried herself like someone auditioning for royalty. Perfectly styled hair, a designer handbag slung over one shoulder, and a smile so polished it practically reflected sunlight. But it wasn't long before I realized underneath that smile was something sharper, something mean. The first thing she said to me wasn't, "Hi or nice to meet you." No. She looked me up and down and said, "Oh, you're Kelly. I thought you'd be taller." I blinked, unsure how to respond. James immediately put a hand on my back and said, "She's perfect the way she is." But Stephanie just smirked and said, "I was just saying." That's how she operated weaponized politeness. Comments that seemed innocent until you realized they left tiny cuts. To James's mom, she said, "You must have been stunning when you were younger." To his dad, who'd just been laid off, "So are you finally going to retire and enjoy life delivered?" With a soft laugh, a sip of wine, and wide eyes like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. She had a talent for finding people's weak spots and pressing her heel down, always smiling, always pretending not to notice the bruises she'd left behind. The worst part, Brad adored it. He laughed at her digs, nodded at her gossip, and stood beside her like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Maybe in a twisted way she was, because they were the same kind of cruel with a layer of charm on top. It wasn't long before Stephanie started trying to wedge herself deeper into the family, especially with James's mom. Lunches, shopping trips, innocent at first, until we noticed the shift. Suddenly, James's mom was making offhand remarks. "Brad calls me every week," or "It's so nice having someone like Stephanie in the family, she's so thoughtful." Stephanie had been planting seeds, comparing the brothers, subtly framing Brad as the better son without ever saying it directly, and people bought it. But what really confirmed it for me was a dinner party, just a simple meal with family. Someone congratulated James on his promotion, and Stephanie leaned in with a tilt of her head and said, "Didn't Brad almost get a promotion too? If his boss wasn't so jealous, he totally would have." That's when I knew. She wasn't just here to date Brad. She was here to take over, and if I didn't do something soon, she'd rewrite every narrative we had left. When James proposed to me, It was everything I'd dreamed of, quiet, sincere, and filled with love. We'd gone for a walk in the park where we had our first date, just the two of us. He dropped to one knee, hands shaking, voice cracking, and I said yes through happy tears. That night we called our families to share the news, our hearts full. But even in that moment, I should have known Brad and Stephanie wouldn't let us have this. Because less than 48 hours later, they announced their engagement. No phone call, no quiet joy. Just a screaming photo on Instagram. Stephanie's hand shoved in the camera with a ring the size of a marble. The caption read, "When you know, Jark Yas power couple. Yaj, better than." A fairy tale. It wasn't subtle, it was a shot across the bow. James laughed when he saw it at first. He just couldn't let us have a moment, he said. But beneath his smile, I saw the same thing I felt, dread. We both knew Brad wasn't in love. He was in competition. From then on, our engagement became a side note in every family gathering. Stephanie made sure of it. She'd hijack conversations with stories about their wedding plans, her venue, her dress, her colors. Even when someone complimented my ring, she'd smile and say, "You know, Brad was this close to proposing in Paris, but I told him I wanted something real." The tipping point came at James's parents' house. We'd just shared that we picked a fall date, and Stephanie clapped her hands. "Oh my gosh, maybe we'll all get married the same year, like a family wedding season." Brad chimed in, grinning. "Guess we're just a family of overachievers, huh?" It hit me then, this wasn't about love or celebration. For them, it was about stealing every ounce of joy they couldn't create on their own. Still, I tried to be gracious. I bit my tongue, smiled through Stephanie's faux compliments and over-the-top stories. But inside I was drawing a line, because there's a difference between being included in someone's joy and being baited into their circus. And if they thought they'd steal our spotlight on the biggest day of our lives, they were about to find out some of us know how to shine without stepping on anyone else. It started with something as simple as napkins. I'd stepped away from our engagement party for just a moment to grab an extra stack from the laundry room. The music was playing, people were laughing, the scent of barbecue in the air. But then, I heard voices in the hallway, hushed and sharp-edged. I recognized them instantly, Brad and Stephanie. At first I thought they were gossiping, maybe griping about the food or judging the guest list, classic behavior. But what I heard next stopped me cold. "We need to make sure their wedding isn't the one people remember." Brad said, his tone low and cutting. Stephanie giggled and replied, "Let them think we're supportive. Then when the big day comes, we'll hit her where it hurts." I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just stood there pressed to the wall, listening as the people who were supposed to be our family plotted to destroy the happiest day of our lives. Stephanie's plan was twisted in the most calculated way. I'll cozy up to her bridesmaids, stir up a little drama between them, just enough to throw everything off balance, distract them. She'll never see it coming. Brad's idea, even worse. He wanted to pressure James' parents into adding strangers to our guest list. His co-workers, old drinking buddies, whoever would create tension and confusion. Chaos by design. And then came the grand finale, as Stephanie called it. A surprise toast at our reception under the guise of sentiment where she'd paint me as an overbearing bridezilla. "People will be talking about it for years," she whispered. My heart raced. I felt nauseous. These weren't petty siblings being dramatic. This was warfare wrapped in glitter and fake smiles. They didn't want attention. They wanted ruin. I slipped back into the party and smiled through the rest of the night. No one knew, not even James. But as soon as the last guest left, I sat him down and told him everything, word for word. He went pale. They wouldn't. He whispered, but then he stopped. He knew they would. He knew. That night, something in both of us shifted. We wouldn't fight fire with fire, not yet. But we wouldn't stay quiet either. They had a plan. So did I. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to have a spotlight. After hearing Brad and Stephanie's plan to humiliate me at our wedding, I knew confronting them directly wouldn't work. They'd just gaslight, deflect, play the victim, especially Stephanie with her wounded doe eyes and backhanded smiles. So I did what any woman pushed too far might do. I built a quiet army. It started with a name, Amy. I remember James once mentioning that Brad had broken her heart years ago. A quick search on social media, and there she was. I messaged her carefully explaining everything. No drama, just honesty. Her response. "That doesn't surprise me at all. I'm in." Then came Becca, Lisa, Danielle. One after another, women Brad had used lied to, ghosted. Most of them still had screenshots, love letters, receipts literally and emotionally. They were more than willing to help once they knew what Stephanie was planning, and what she didn't know. We created a group chat. I called it the guest list. It was part support group, part strategy room. These women didn't just want catharsis, they wanted accountability. Amy still had letters Brad wrote to her while dating two other women. Becca had Venmo screenshots of him borrowing money while secretly taking someone else out. Lisa, she had names, dates, and even a photo of Brad on a dating app while he was supposedly committed. This wasn't gossip, it was documentation. Stephanie thought she was marrying a prize. She had no clue she was planning a wedding with a man held together by lies and fake confidence. And I wasn't about to let her find out in whispers. So, we planned the delivery. They wouldn't storm the altar. They wouldn't scream. That's not how truth sticks. No, we'd let the evidence speak. One by one, they would stand, in beautiful dresses, holding envelopes. And when the moment came, they'd show the world not just who Brad really was, but what happens when women stop staying silent. Brad and Stephanie wanted a fairy tale. They got a reckoning. The day of their wedding arrived like any other sunshine music, a venue dripping in money and vanity. James and I arrived quietly dressed like background characters because that's exactly what we wanted to be, for now. Everything about their ceremony screamed overcompensation, the dramatic floral arches, the six-tier cake no one would enjoy, and the way Brad strutted around like he built the place himself. Stephanie, of course, made her entrance with a smug smile, and a dress that sparkled like she thought it could blind the truth. Then, showtime. Amy rose first. Calm, beautiful, graceful. She walked up the aisle with quiet command and said, "Before you make promises, Brad, maybe tell everyone about the ones you broke." The room froze. Stephanie blinked like someone had cut the music mid-dance. Amy handed over the first envelope, Brad's old love letters, each one signed like a teenage boy playing house with three girls at once. Stephanie's hands trembled as she read the lines. Then came Becca with proof Brad borrowed money to fund other dates. Then Lisa with the infamous nickname list, every ex saved in his phone, with cutesy aliases so no one would catch on. And finally, Danielle holding up a printed Tinder chat, time-stamped when Brad was supposedly committed. The whispers turned into gasps. Phones came out. Guests started filming. Stephanie's perfect day cracked right there on the marble floor. Brad stammered, "This is a setup." They're lying. But his eyes betrayed him. They darted, panicked, caught. Stephanie didn't run. She stood there, fire in her eyes, clutching the crumpled letters. "Are these lies, Brad?" she hissed. "Because they all sound like you." The officiant didn't know whether to proceed or call security. Eventually, they forced the vows out like two strangers reading a contract. The room sat in stunned silence, the fairy tale gutted by facts. No one clapped. At the reception, the gossip was louder than the music. No one asked about the dress or the food. They asked about the women, the letters, the lies. Brad and Stephanie wanted an unforgettable day. They got one, just not the kind you frame and hang on a wall. After the wedding wreckage, silence swept through the family like fog over a battlefield. No one called, no one texted. Everyone was too stunned to speak, or maybe too embarrassed to be associated with the disaster they had just witnessed. For 2 days, James and I said nothing. We let the tension hang, let it soak. Then the whispers started. Emma called first James's sister, her voice low, like she was afraid the walls were listening. "Mom's upset. Not at you, at Brad." She finally saw it, all of it. Apparently, after the ceremony, Stephanie's parents had pulled Brad aside and unloaded on him in front of a few remaining guests. Furious, humiliated. They hadn't bankrolled a $30,000 wedding to host a public shaming. Brad tried to play the victim again. They ambushed us, but no one was buying it. The exes, the letters, the receipts. It was undeniable. Then James's mom made a move we never saw coming. She called us for dinner. Now, let me be clear, James's parents had always done the neutral thing, polite, diplomatic. But when we walked through their front door that night, the energy had shifted. His dad was stiff. His mom looked like she hadn't slept. Over meatloaf and mashed potatoes, it came out. Brad was blaming us, saying we orchestrated everything, that we'd ruined his life, and they wanted to know. Was it true? I looked at James. He gave me a nod, and I told them everything. How I overheard Brad and Stephanie plotting to humiliate us, how they wanted to sabotage my wedding, break up my bridesmaids, make me cry in front of a crowd. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't dramatize it, I just told the truth calmly, factually. James's dad went pale. His mom said nothing for a long time. Then finally, I always gave Brad the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I shouldn't have. That was the moment the family line cracked. In the days that followed, Brad tried to spin it, said the exes were bitter that we planted them, but nobody bought it. Stephanie. She stopped posting. Word spread that she'd moved back in with her parents. Her fairy tale had ended with envelopes and exes. And for the first time in years, the family didn't rally behind Brad. They let him sit in his own mess, alone. The second wedding, our wedding, was everything theirs, wasn't simple, sincere, and surrounded by people who genuinely loved us. But even as I zipped up my dress that morning, a quiet tension hummed beneath the surface. We hadn't heard a word from Brad or Stephanie in weeks. Not a call, not a text. But that silence, it didn't feel like surrender, it felt like a storm waiting to hit. And we were right. 2 days before the wedding, one of James's old co-workers messaged him, "Hey, I got an invite to your wedding, can't wait," except we hadn't invited him. That one message turned into 3, then 5. Duplicate RSVPs, mismatched addresses, names we didn't send invites to. Brad and Stephanie had somehow gotten hold of our guest list and tried to flood our wedding with fake guests. It was pathetic. But we were ready. We'd hired professional security, ID check at the door, no invitation, no entry, not even for family. So when Brad and Stephanie rolled up to our venue dressed to impress, clutching forged invites and smug grins, the guards stopped them cold. "I'm the groom's brother," Brad snapped. "You can't keep family out." The head of security didn't flinch. "You're not on the list." Stephanie threw a full-blown tantrum, screaming about rights revenge, how we'd ruined her wedding, so she had every right to be present for ours. But no one cared. They were turned away. Quietly. Firmly. And as they drove off, Brad's face red, Stephanie livid behind the windshield. James and I stood just out of sight, watching through the trees. We didn't smile. We didn't gloat. We just closed the door on them literally and emotionally. The rest of the day was magic, real magic. We danced, laughed, toasted, with people who lifted us up instead of tearing us down. No fake speeches, no hidden agendas. Just love, messy, honest, and earned. That night, as the candles flickered low and the last song played, James pulled me close and whispered, "We didn't just get married today. We got free." He was right. Our second wedding wasn't just a beginning. It was the final slam of a door that never deserved to be open in the first place. Looking back now, it wasn't just about a ruined wedding or a petty sibling rivalry. It was about reclaiming something far more sacred, peace. For years, James carried the weight of being the lesser brother, the one always overshadowed, always dismissed. I watched him shrink himself for the sake of keeping the peace. I watched us bend so others wouldn't break. But the truth is, peace built on silence isn't peace at all. It's submission. Brad and Stephanie tried to hijack our joy, but in the end, they exposed themselves. Every cruel whisper, every fake smile, every manipulative game, it came undone because we chose truth over tolerance. And when the dust settled, they were left with exactly what they deserved: distance. Real love doesn't require spectacle. It doesn't need a bigger venue or louder applause. It shows up quietly, fiercely, and stands beside you when the fireworks fade. That's what James and I have. That's what this whole mess reminded us. So, if you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel like the outsider at your own celebration, let this be your sign. You don't have to invite toxicity to your table just because it shares your last name. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is close the door. And if you want more stories about people who chose peace over performance, stick around. You're not alone, and you deserve a seat at the real table.